Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, well, we're going to zero in on the current state of U.S.-Russia relations.
Yeah, it's a big topic.
Definitely. And you've probably seen all those urgent news alerts popping up. It can feel like a lot.
Overwhelming sometimes.
Exactly. So our goal here is just to pull out the really significant info from those headlines for you.
Kind of cut through the noise.
Right. We'll look at the big picture stuff. Geopolitics, what's happening with tech and space, and the economic impacts, the stuff we're all feeling.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're going beyond just the day-to-day reports. We want to understand the underlying dynamics.
How it all connects.
Precisely. How things that seem separate, like space tech and, say, sanctions, actually feed into this bigger story. It's all interconnected.
Okay, great. So let's unpack that, starting with geopolitics.
Sounds good.
One thing that keeps coming up in the sources again and again is NATO expanding east, closer to Russia's borders. Why is that such a consistent flashpoint?
Well, for Russia, it's not just lines on a map, It taps into deep-seated historical views about their own security.
Like Cold War thinking.
Sort of, yeah. Think about it. Buffer zones were incredibly important then. So this expansion, it's seen as chipping away at that security buffer.
Bringing a perceived adversary closer.
Exactly. Which naturally fuels this sense of strategic vulnerability. Makes them nervous.
Right, okay. And then, kind of in response, we see the U.S. announcing new sanctions. What's the play there? What are they trying to achieve?
So the immediate aim is pretty clear. Limit Russia's economic power, put political pressure on them.
Standard playbook, maybe?
To an extent, but, and this is important, some experts in the source material are actually warning about this. They're saying this constant back and forth could maybe inadvertently push things towards a Cold War 2.0.
Cold War 2.0. Wow. That sounds serious.
It is, and it's not just political talk. They're worried about real impacts on, say, global market stability.
What are the signs they're watching for? Like, how would we know if we're heading that way?
They mention things like, more aggressive military posturing, diplomatic channels breaking down, that sort of thing. Red flags.
That does paint a worrying picture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about old school power moves anymore, is it?
No, not at all.
The sources also highlight this really interesting competition now in tech, especially space. It's like a whole new arena for this rivalry.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. You've got the U.S. with private players like SpaceX really pushing the envelope.
Get moving fast.
And then Russia's Roscosmos. And NASA, meanwhile, talking about moon bases, really ambitious stuff.
And Russia's not sitting still either.
Not at all. They're building partnerships. The big one mentioned is with China for their own moon missions. It really does feel like a new space race is kicking off.
So this isn't just planting flags this time. There are actual strategic benefits to winning in space tech.
Oh, definitely. Think about satellite technology advancements. That impacts everything: communication, GPS navigation, surveillance.
Okay.
So if you link that back to the geopolitical stuff we were just talking about, well, control and access in space, that becomes another really critical area where they're competing.
Right. Okay, so bringing it back down to earth.
Right.
The economy seems just as tangled.
The
source uses this great phrase, energy chess, to describe what's happening in the energy sector. What does that actually look like?
Well, basically, think of both the U.S. and Russia using their clout in oil and gas markets, like strategic chess pieces.
Manipulating supply.
Things like that. Exactly. Production levels, choosing where pipelines go, supply routes. They can all be tweaked to apply pressure or maybe gain an edge.
And that hits global energy prices directly.
Directly, which, as you know, ripples right down to consumers everywhere. I mean, how do you see these energy moves affecting daily life?
Well, the most obvious place is at the gas pump, right?
Yeah.
It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the source actually throws in a bit of practical advice amidst all this complexity.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It basically says, look, diversify your investments. It's a way to kind of cushion yourself against the economic shocks this whole rivalry creates.
That's a really key takeaway, actually. Good practical advice. Spreading investments across different areas, different countries maybe, it can act as a buffer.
Against the volatility.
Exactly. The kind of volatility that these big geopolitical tensions always seem to stir up.
So if we try to boil all this down, what's the main takeaway from the sources about where things stand between the U.S. and Russia right now?
I think the core message is that this isn't just one thing. It's a dynamic contest playing out on multiple levels: political, tech, economic, all at the same time.
And they all affect each other.
Right. with
Yeah.
real tangible consequences felt across the globe. Nothing happens in isolation here.
Okay. So wrapping up then, here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. Something to chew on. In a world that's getting more and more connected, especially through shared technologies, how might that very need for some cooperation, even between rivals, how might that act as a sort of brake, maybe, on things escalating into outright conflict in the future?
That's an interesting angle. Cooperation as a check.
Yeah, just something to think about. Thanks for digging into this with us today.